Oops. Okay. So you know, the remaining hour and a half that we have with you, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about our current context of our programming and some national trends and best practices. And then we have an hour in small groups to really hear from you. And then at the end of that time, we'll come back for the last 15 minutes or so to talk again in a large group. And we will definitely we will conclude our time together at 2:30. So thanks again for being here. So this question, what is children, youth, and family ministry? I think, at least for me, and maybe for some of you, the first and obvious thought in response to that question is to think about what's already happening. What are the programs, actually, that are happening for our kids and our youth? So I want to go quickly through some of that. Lorenzo helped make a slideshow. So on Sunday mornings, we begin kind of 8:45, and it goes till noon or later. We have a variety of spaces where our kids are. We have the nursery, which is upstairs, with Bertakan and Osni. And then we have our preschool and kindergarten class with Bonnie Hester as our teacher. And we have an average of about 6 kids in the preschool class each Sunday. And on Sunday mornings from 10 to 10:50, we have the 1st and 3rd graders are in a class with Janet Eady, and the 4th and 5th graders are in a class with Andrew Greenhaw. And the beginning of that time period is children's choir with Gretchen, led by Gretchen Parr. And we have, it ranges each week, but Janet's class has about somewhere between 4 and 8, and the average in Andrew's class, where's Andrew? That's about right, 4 on any given Sunday. We also have a Sunday school class taught by Jim Maroney, who's in the room here somewhere, for 6th through 12th grade. And the average per Sunday is about 2 youth in that class. And then during the 11 o'clock service, for those of you who are 11 o'clock service folk, we, about 10 minutes into that service, we invite the kids to leave with us for Children's Church, which is happening upstairs in the North Room. And it's kind of a one-room schoolhouse model, and we use the Godly Play curriculum. And so we have kids from 4 years old, and sometimes 3 years old, up through 5th grade. And again, it ranges, but we've been having an average of 18. Sometimes we have as many as 22 kids in that space. And they stay in there, and we tell a story, and we do crafts and games after that. And then in the Sunday afternoon and evening, we, of course, still have things going on here. Our youth programs, we have our YES stands for Youth Every Sunday. And that's our middle school program led by Alex Bonte and Emma Fuji. And we have anywhere between 4 to 8, usually about 6 kids per Sunday that are there. And Winthrop is the high school group led by a really great group of leaders, Andrew, and then Elizabeth and Chris Buchholz, and Leah Zimmerman. And it averages between 8 and 12 on any given Sunday in the Winthrop group. And then, still more on Sunday, we have Songs of the Soul led by Linda Krebin and John Krebin-Coates, with about an average of 12 youth in that choir. And that happens from 6 to 8. Where's Linda? 6 to 8 on Sundays in the Durant House. And then, of course, we have our intergenerational and family programs, and I'm just going to show some pictures of a few of them. Camp Cass, how many folks have been or were at Camp Cass? Great. This past fall, we had over 100 people. I think the youngest was Bree, who was 2, and the oldest was Margie, so almost 90 at that point. So it was a great intergenerational group of folk. The Advent's Craft Workshop, we also had an Advent concert this year that drew about 50 people, kids and adults. Mardi Gras, which is happening on Tuesday, little plug, Tuesday at 5:30. The snail people will be back again. And then service projects, food bank, project Rebuilding Together, those are often intergenerational events. So since September, we have had about 100 children or youth move through any one of those programs, at least once, that I talked about. But clearly, if you were paying attention to the numbers, we don't have 100 kids or youth here on any given Sunday. And so it leads to the question of why is that? What's going on? So we want to talk a little bit about a few national trends. For the most part, families are less stable, more mobile, more domestically isolated, and more influenced by culture than by institution than they have been in the past. What that means is that they are oftentimes the extended family is far away. There's not so much, there's a slightly exception at this church. There's not so much a culture that everyone in my family has gone to this church forever, so this is where I go. But there's that tradition that happens. It's a little bit less, especially on the West Coast. There are, as you know, multiple things that are good and worthy and wonderful, developmental, spiritually fulfilling things to do on a Sunday morning that compete for families' times, and during the week as well. And church is just one of many options for development and growth. And then the Christian story is seen now one of many ways that people draw on to make meaning, which changes the way the Christian story functions in people's lives. That, again, perhaps particularly on the West Coast, the Christian story is still very important to people. It's one of many. And so it's not necessarily the only or primary way that folks make meaning in their life. So those things they change the role of church and what role that plays and what the expectation is about what happens. And so even some of our most committed families, people who are in completely here and are very committed to the spiritual growth of their children and youth and their families, they're not here every week. That's just the reality. So there's some challenges around that. But there's also tremendous opportunities when we look at what people who are interested in progressive Christianity, progressive Christian churches are looking for. We have tremendous opportunities. So folks are looking for ways to make meaning. Really, that people are still looking for significant opportunities to make meaning out of what's happening in their lives and for their family. Opportunity to discover or to rediscover purpose. That happens all throughout the lifespan. Different moments, folks are saying, I've retired, I want something to give me a new purpose. Teenagers are seeking for, what is it that I want to do in my life? Young adults, for sure, all throughout the lifespan, seeking purpose. People are wanting communal and intergenerational experiences, particularly for folks who work during the week. They aren't so interested in coming to an activity on Sunday that separates them from their family. They want to be together. And they want to be, partly because folks' extended families are all over the place, they want to have an extended family experience at their churches, at their faith communities. People are interested in a faith that affirms and encourages diversity of beliefs and practices. This is kind of what I mentioned before. Folks are invested in their Christianity and also in an interfaith world. There's a reality and a value for living and learning about other faiths, to understand the context of our own faith in relation to other faiths. They want a community that affirms and talks about that. And they want a place that's hopeful and an engaged faith and faith community. So sometimes when you're listening to the news or the other places in the world, it can just feel like, there's just so much that's hard in the world. And there's a desire to come be with community that doesn't sugarcoat or shy away from those things, but approaches those with a hopeful, positive, constructive, moving forward way about them, similar to how we kind of talked about the earth today. And then the other piece is holds fast to the narrative of God through the life and witness of Jesus. And what that means is that folks who are interested in a progressive Christian church really want to talk about and experience and think about a God who is present and active in the world, even as we understand that God in different ways, and that God is modeled through the life and witness and ministry of Jesus, that we talk about who Jesus was. And again, we can understand that in lots of different ways, but that the witness of Jesus as a way of understanding God's love for the world is important. Okay, so how that translates across the country into some best practices for places that have vital children and youth ministries. Communities that have vital children, youth, and family ministries see spiritual development and faith formation as a priority for the entire community. It's not just something that happens between 0 and 18 years old. That the communities that have the most vital place for children and youth are the communities where the adults themselves are growing and nurtured and challenged and supported in their faith. Parents and family are seen as the primary religious educators. So that sometimes when I say that to parents, there's this anxiety that gets raised, right? It's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And the piece of that is what's being trying to say there is that children and youth, their family, however that is, their primary place that they live and move in the world is the place where they are primarily formed. And so that goes back to the adults in their lives being spiritually fed and nurtured so that they can then do that in their homes. The role of the faith community is to commit to accompanying parents in that work, to come alongside parents and support them and to encourage them, to stand in there for them when they need support. Let's see, other network of experiences, meaning that there's all kinds of ways to plug in. It's not just one size fits all. Some people like Bible studies, some people like camp, some people grow through service projects, some people grow through mentoring relationships, that we need to be providing all of those things. And then the emphasis really is on relationship building. It's not so much the cool program, it's the relationships that are formed in those rooms. And then relevant connections between faith and life that we're talking about and figuring out at all the developmental places. How is this important? Why do you care? How does this relate to your life? Okay, so back again to this question. What does that look like? What does it mean, children, youth, and family ministries? So there's sort of three main things. There's Christian education, which is really how I would talk about it is the intentional communication of the Christian story and history and traditions so that folks can get a grounding, a sense of what that background is. These are the parents who say to me, I don't care, I want my child to decide for themselves, but I want them to have some point from which to make that decision. I want them to know the history so they know what they're choosing or not. So the ways that we do that are Bible studies, confirmation class, often in worship. And it's a lot of what's happening in our head. That's one way to think about it, is how are we learning cognitively about our faith? On the other side, we have spiritual development. And spiritual development we thought of as a process of nurturing the intrinsic human capacity for self-transcendence. That we created from God, and there's a sense in all of us that there's something bigger to which we belong. And spiritual development is nurturing that piece. And so some of the ways we do that is when we provide opportunities for people to experience awe or beauty through worship or music. They have a sense of something beyond themselves to which they're drawn. When we encourage positive relationships and opportunities to practice empathy, compassion, generosity, that we develop that capacity to be part of something broader than ourselves. When we engage in service, we do that as well. When we notice and affirm a child's gifts or talents and help them see how those can play out in the world, we help people develop purpose and meaning. And those times when we really help ourselves and others experience the divine. So prayer, meditation, the labyrinth, that people from very young all the way up to old can experience those things. So it's really the heart, how we're developing our heart. And then the third is discipleship. So how is it that we understand our lives as models, being modeled after Jesus? So in our relationships, in the work that we do, in our service project, to talk about that as we do those because that was the witness of Jesus in the world, we believe that that brings abundant life for ourselves and other people. And so I would say that is the feet. So we have the head, the heart, and the feet, and all of that together is what I talk about with faith formation, which is a whole body experience, right? A whole body for an individual and our whole body together as the body of Christ. That it's not something that just happens with kids, that we're all doing it. It's not just something that happens in our head in a Bible study, but it's all of who we are that helps us to grow in our faith. So that was a very quick run through of my thoughts on faith formation in the Progressive Christian Church, which still leads us to the question of what does that look like here? What do we feel our particular call and gifts are? What do we particularly want for our children, youth, and ourselves here?